The child's scream cut through the Montana wind like a knife through paper. Marshal Jake Sullivan kicked his horse harder, dust flying behind him as he rode toward the sound. Something was wrong, real wrong. He could feel it in his bones, the way you feel a storm coming before you see the clouds. He crested the rocky ridge just in time to see it happen. A covered wagon tilted sideways on the narrow mountain road, then crashed into the ravine below with a sound like thunder. Wood splintered. Horses screamed. Then nothing but silence and the whisper of wind through dry grass. Jake didn't hesitate. He spurred his horse down the steep slope, rocks sliding under the animal's hooves. Smoke rose from the wreckage, and he could smell blood in the air. His heart pounded as memories tried to surface. Another crash. Another fire. 3 years ago. Sarah's voice calling his name before the flames took her. He shook his head hard. Focus, Jake. Focus on now. The wagon lay on its side like a dying animal. One will spun slowly in the air. The canvas cover had torn clean off, and supplies were scattered everywhere. Flour sacks split open. A child's doll with yellow hair lay face down in the dirt. And there, underneath a broken piece of wood, he saw her. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, with dark hair and a torn blue dress. She was trapped but alive, her tiny fist clutching something tight. Tears had washed clean lines down her dusty cheeks. And when she looked up at him, Jake's world stopped spinning. Those eyes, gray-green like storm clouds, with little flecks of gold around the edges. He'd seen those exact eyes every morning for 2 years, looking back at him from across the breakfast table. Sarah's eyes. "Don't cry, little one," he whispered, his voice catching in his throat. He reached toward her with a trembling hand. She blinked once, slow and trusting. Then she smiled through her tears and said the impossible thing. The thing that made Jake's heart stop cold. "Daddy." Jake jerked his hand back like he'd touched fire. His breath came short and fast. This couldn't be happening. Sarah never had children. They'd tried for years, but it never happened. And Sarah had been dead for 3 winters. This little girl couldn't exist. But those eyes didn't lie. He forced himself to breathe, to think like a lawman instead of a broken man seeing ghosts. The child was hurt and scared. That's what mattered right now. Everything else could wait. "Easy there, sweetheart," he said, making his voice gentle. "I'm gonna get you out of here." He lifted the splintered board carefully, checking for other injuries. Her left arm had a nasty scrape, and her dress was torn, but nothing seemed broken. She let him help her sit up, never taking those familiar eyes off his face. "What's your name, little one?" he asked. "Emma," she said in a voice like small bells. "Emma Rose Croft. Are you really my daddy?" Jake's hands shook as he brushed dirt from her hair. Croft. He knew that name. Sarah's maiden name had been Sarah Croft before she married him and became Sarah Sullivan. I don't know," he said honestly, "but we're going to figure it out, okay?" A groan came from deeper in the wreckage. Jake looked around and saw them. 3 more children, all older than Emma, huddled together near the overturned wagon. 2 boys who looked like twins, maybe 8 years old, and a girl about 10 with braids and a bloody nose. Beyond them, he found the adults, a man and woman, both thrown clear when the wagon crashed. Both dead. The woman's neck was bent wrong, and the man had a piece of wood through his chest. Jake had seen enough death to know they were beyond help. He turned back to Emma, who was watching him with those impossible eyes. "Those other children," he said, "are they your family?" Emma nodded. "My brothers Tom and Tim, and my sister Mary. Mama and Papa are sleeping, aren't they?" The innocence in her voice nearly broke him. She didn't understand yet. Maybe that was a blessing. "Yes, sweetheart. They're sleeping." He stood up and called to the other children. "Hey there. I'm Marshal Sullivan. You're safe now." The older girl, Mary, helped the 2 boys stand up. All 3 were banged up, but walking. They looked at Jake with the hollow eyes of children who'd seen too much too young. "Emma," Mary said, her voice shaky, "come away from the strange man." But Emma didn't move. She reached up and took Jake's big hand in her small one, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "He's not strange," she said. "He's my daddy. Mama told me about him." Mary's eyes went wide. Mama never said nothing about Emma having a different daddy. Jake knelt down, so he was eye level with all four children. His marshal's badge caught the sunlight, and he made sure they could see it. "I'm here to help," he said. "All of you. We need to get you to town, get you looked at by a doctor. Can you do that?" The boys nodded, still too shocked to speak. Mary bit her lip and nodded too. But Emma just smiled and squeezed his hand tighter. "I knew you'd come," she said. "Mama Sarah told me you would." Jake went cold all over. Sarah. She'd said Sarah, not Mama. How could this child know his dead wife's name? He helped all four children into his wagon, Emma insisting on sitting right beside him on the driver's bench. As they started the long ride to Millerville, she leaned against his arm like she belonged there. "Daddy," she said sleepily, "do you still have a music box?" The one with the dancing lady inside. Jake nearly dropped the reins. Sarah's music box. The one she'd hidden away and never let him touch. The one he'd never found after she died, though he'd searched the house top to bottom. "How do you know about that?" he whispered. But Emma's eyes were already closing, her small body finally giving in to exhaustion. As she drifted off to sleep, still holding his hand, she mumbled something that made his blood run cold. "The music box is under the loose floorboard behind the stove, just like Mama said it would be." The town of Millerville sat in a valley like a handful of wooden blocks scattered by a child. Jake's wagon rolled down Main Street as the sun hung low in the western sky, casting long shadows between the buildings. People stopped what they were doing to stare. For children, a marshal's wagon usually meant trouble, and folks in small towns had a nose for trouble. Dr. Henderson's office was above the general store, reached by a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. The old doc had been patching up cowboys and miners for 20 years, and nothing much surprised him anymore. But when Jake carried Emma up those stairs, followed by three more dusty, quiet children, Henderson raised his bushy eyebrows. "Wagon crash up on Devil's Ridge," Jake explained as he set Emma on the examining table. "Parents didn't make it." Henderson nodded grimly and got to work. He checked each child carefully, cleaning cuts and wrapping scrapes. The twins had matching bruises on their shoulders for being thrown around in the crash. Mary had a bump on her head that made her dizzy, but Emma just sat quietly, swinging her legs and watching Jake with those storm cloud eyes. "They're banged up, but they'll heal," Henderson said finally. "What they need now is rest and regular meals, and someone to look after them." Jake knew what the doc was asking. For orphan children didn't have many options in a place like Millerville. The nearest orphanage was 3 days' ride, if it even had room. Most likely, they'd be split up and sent to work on different ranches. That was just how things worked out here. "I'll figure something out," Jake said. Emma slipped off the table and took his hand again. "Can we go home now, Daddy?" Mary shot her a sharp look. "Emma, stop calling him that. He's not your daddy." But Emma just smiled. "Yes, he is. I know where he keeps the music box." Jake's heart hammered in his chest. He'd been trying not to think about what she'd said in the wagon, trying to convince himself she'd just been babbling. Children said strange things when they were hurt and scared. But the way she looked at him, so sure and trusting, made his hand shake. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you all somewhere safe for the night." His house was a 10-minute walk from town, a simple wooden structure with 2 rooms and a front porch that needed fixing. Sarah had always said she wanted to paint it yellow, like sunshine. Jake had never gotten around to it after she died. Inside, the house felt cold and empty like it always did. Jake lit the oil lamps and stirred the coals in the stove, trying to bring some warmth to the place. The twins sat close together on his old sofa, while Mary kept a protective arm around Emma. "I'll make some soup," Jake said, more to fill the silence than anything else. "You kids just rest." But Emma had other ideas. She stood up and walked straight to the corner by the stove, like she'd been in the house 100 times before. She knelt down and pressed her small hands against the floorboards. "This one's loose," she said, looking up at Jake. Just like Mama Sarah said, Jake's blood turned to ice water. He checked every inch of this house after Sarah died, looking for some clue about where she'd gone that night, some explanation for why she'd been in the barn when it caught fire. He'd never found any loose floorboards. "Emma, honey," he said carefully, "you can't know that." She tilted her head, confused by his doubt. "But I do know. Mama showed me." She pressed harder on one board, and it shifted slightly. "See? It wiggles." Mary and the twins were watching now, their eyes wide. Jake felt like he was walking through a dream as he knelt beside Emma and examined the floorboard. She was right. It did wiggle. How had he missed it? "You push here," Emma said, guiding his hands to the right spot. "Then it pops up." The board came free with a soft crack, revealing a small space underneath. And there, wrapped in oilcloth, was Sarah's music box. Jake's hands trembled as he lifted it out. The box was made of dark wood with silver hinges, about the size of a book. Sarah had brought it with her when they married, said it belonged to her grandmother. But she'd been secretive about it, never letting him see inside. "Open it, Daddy," Emma said softly. The hinges creaked as Jake lifted the lid. Inside, a tiny ballerina in a blue dress stood frozen on a small platform. Below her, tucked into the silk lining, were papers, letters, and something that made Jake's heart stop. A photograph. Sarah, but not Sarah as he'd known her. This Sarah had a round belly under her blue dress and a hand resting protectively over it. She was pregnant. "She wanted to tell you," Emma said, her child's voice somehow carrying the weight of years. But then the fire happened. Jake's hand shook as he unfolded the papers. The first was a letter in Sarah's careful handwriting, dated just 2 weeks before she died. "My dearest Jake," it began. "By the time you read this, you'll know our secret. I wanted to tell you about the baby, but I was scared. We tried for so long, and I was afraid to hope. The doctor in Billings confirmed it last month. We're going to have a child, my love. I pray you'll forgive me for waiting so long to share this joy with you." The letter went on, but Jake's vision blurred with tears. He blinked them away and found another paper underneath. A birth certificate, official and stamped, for one Emma Rose Croft, born March 15th, 1870. The mother's name was listed as Sarah Elizabeth Croft. The father's name was blank. "I don't understand," Jake whispered. "Sarah died in the fire. How could you?" "Cousin Beth saved me," Emma said simply. "Mama Sarah got me out of the fire, but she couldn't get out herself. Cousin Beth took me and raised me like her own baby, but she always told me about my real daddy." Jake looked at the other 3 children, understanding flooding through him like cold water. "Beth was your mama?" Mary nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Mama always said Emma was special, that she had a different daddy somewhere. But we thought she was just making up stories." Another paper lay at the bottom of the music box. This one was in different handwriting, rougher and hurried. "Jake," it read, "if something happens to me, Emma is yours. She's Sarah's daughter, which makes her yours too. I've raised her like my own, but she belongs with you. She has Sarah's eyes and Sarah's heart. Take care of her. Elizabeth Croft." Jake sat back on his heels, the weight of it all crushing down on him. Sarah had been pregnant. She died saving their child. And that child had been raised by Sarah's cousin, only to lose her second mother in another accident 5 years later. "The fire," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, she was trying to save you?" Emma nodded. "She got me out through the window. Then she went back for something else, but the roof fell down." Sarah's jewelry box. Jake remembered now. Sarah had gone back into the burning barn for her jewelry box, the one with their wedding rings and her mother's necklace. He'd never understood why she'd risk her life for such things. But now he knew. She hadn't gone back for jewelry. She'd gone back for papers, for proof of Emma's birth, for evidence of the child he'd never known existed. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Heavy boots on the porch, the kind that meant business. Jake quickly closed the music box and stood up, motioning for the children to stay quiet. He opened the door to find Samuel Cross, the town banker, standing on his porch with a grim expression and a leather folder in his hands. Evening, Marshall, Cross said. I heard about the accident. Terrible thing. What can I do for you, Sam? Cross shifted uncomfortably. Well, it's about the deceased. William and Elizabeth Croft. They had financial obligations. Jake's stomach clenched. What kind of obligations? That's Marshall. Substantial ones. The ranch, the cattle, even their personal effects. Cross opened his folder and pulled out an official-looking document. According to this, Cornelius Blackwood owns everything now, including those children. Jake stared at the document in Samuel Cross's hands like it was a rattlesnake ready to strike. The banker's words echoed in his head. Cornelius Blackwood owns everything now, including those children. That can't be legal, Jake said, his voice tight. Children aren't property. Cross shifted nervously on the porch. According to territorial law, when parents die in debt, guardianship goes to the primary creditor. Blackwood's got papers filed in Billings, all official and proper. Behind Jake, he could hear the children whispering. Emma's small voice rose above the others. The bad man is coming, isn't he? Jake turned to look at her. Those storm cloud eyes held a knowledge that no 5-year-old should possess. What bad man, sweetheart? The one who hurt Mama Sarah. The one who made the fire. Cross frowned. Marshall, the child's been through trauma. She's probably confused about. Get off my porch, Sam, Jake said quietly. The banker's face went pale at the ice in the Marshall's voice. And tell Blackwood, if he wants these children, he can come talk to me himself. After Cross hurried away, Jake bolted the door and turned to face 4 pairs of frightened eyes. Mary held the twins close while Emma sat perfectly still, like she was listening to something only she could hear. Emma, Jake said gently, kneeling in front of her. What do you know about this bad man? He came to see Mama Sarah before the fire. Emma said in that matter-of-fact way children had. He was angry about something. He had mean eyes and a black coat. Mama was scared after he left. Jake's blood ran cold. Sarah had never mentioned any visitors that day. But then again, Sarah had hidden a pregnancy from him for months. Wells said she kept secret. Did you hear what they talked about? Emma nodded. He wanted something Mama wouldn't give him. Something about papers and land. He said bad things would happen if she didn't listen. Land. Jake thought about the small plots Sarah had inherited from her father, about 20 miles north of town. Good grazing land with a creek running through it. Sarah had always said they'd build a bigger house there someday, raise cattle and children. Stay here, Jake told the children. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. He rode hard through the growing darkness, Emma's words ringing in his ears. The old Croft homestead sat empty now, had been abandoned since Sarah's father died. But Jake had a feeling he might find answers there. The cabin was dark and cold, but Jake's lantern revealed signs of recent activity. Fresh boot prints in the dust. Papers scattered on the old kitchen table. And there, tucked behind a loose stone in the fireplace, he found what he was looking for. Sarah's diary. Jake's hands trembled as he opened the leather-bound book to the final entries. Sarah's neat handwriting told a story he'd never known. March 20th, Blackwood came again today. He says father's mining claim is worthless, but I don't believe him. There's something under that land he wants badly. He offered to buy me out for practically nothing. March 25th, found father's old survey maps. There's silver under the north pasture, just like he always said. Now I understand why Blackwood wants the land. He knows about the silver. April 2nd, Blackwood threatened me today. Said accidents happen to stubborn women. I'm scared, but I won't let him bully me. That land is Emma's birthright. April 5th, I've hidden the real mining survey and the deed where Jake will never think to look. If something happens to me, I pray he'll find him someday. Blackwood can't have what belongs to our child. The final entry was dated the day Sarah died. April 8th, Blackwood's men have been watching the house. I'm taking the papers to the cave where Jake and I used to meet. If they come for me, At least the proof will be safe. I wish I'd told Jake about the baby. I wish I'd told him about everything. Jake closed the diary, his heart pounding. Sarah had died protecting Emma's inheritance. And somehow, Emma knew where Sarah had hidden the evidence. He rode back to town as fast as his horse could carry him, but he was too late. 3 riders stood outside his house, their horses pawing the ground impatiently. Even in the darkness, Jake recognized the tall, thin figure in the black coat. Cornelius Blackwood. Jake dismounted slowly, his hand resting on his gun. Blackwood was a wealthy rancher with political connections and a reputation for getting what he wanted. 2 hired guns flanked him, their hands hovering near their weapons. Marshal Sullivan, Blackwood called out in a voice smooth as snake oil. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Those children don't belong to anyone but themselves, Jake replied. Blackwood chuckled. The law says different. I have legal guardianship, filed and approved. I'm here to collect what's mine. Why do you want them so badly? Most folks would see 4 orphans as a burden. I'm a generous man, Marshal. I believe in taking care of the less fortunate. Those children will have good homes on my various properties. The boys are old enough to work, earn their keep. The girls can help in the kitchens. Jake heard what Blackwood wasn't saying. Child labor. The man wanted workers he could control completely. Children who had no choice but to obey or starve. Over my dead body, Jake said. One of the gunmen stepped forward, but Blackwood raised a hand. Now, Marshal, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. I have the law on my side. The door behind Jake creaked open. Emma stepped out onto the porch, her small figure bathed in lamplight. She looked straight at Blackwood with those impossible eyes, and the man actually took a step back. You're the fireman, she said quietly. Blackwood's face went white. I don't know what you mean, child. Mama Sarah told me about you. You made the fire because she wouldn't give you the papers. The child is delusional, Blackwood said quickly, but Jake could hear the fear in his voice. Trauma does strange things to young minds. Emma walked to Jake's side and took his hand. The papers are in a cave, Daddy. The one where you and Mama used to go. She hid them there before the fire. Jake's heart nearly stopped. He and Sarah did have a special place. A small cave by the creek where they'd gone courting. He'd never told anyone about it. Not even after Sarah died. It was too private, too sacred. How do you know about the cave, Emma? She smiled up at him with perfect trust. Mama Sarah showed me in my dreams. She said you'd know where to look when the time was right. Blackwood's horse danced nervously as its rider pulled the reins tight. Enough of this nonsense. Hand over the children, Marshal, or I'll have you removed from office. Try it, Jake said. Behind him, Mary appeared in the doorway with the twins. All 4 children stood together, a small army of courage facing down the darkness. Emma squeezed Jake's hand. He can't take us, can he, Daddy? Jake looked down at his daughter, and felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Purpose. A reason to fight that went deeper than duty or law. No, sweetheart, he said. He can't. Blackwood's face twisted with rage. You're making a mistake, Sullivan. I own half the judges in this territory. I have men, money, influence. You have nothing. I have the truth, Jake replied. And I have them. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Blackwood pulled his horse around sharply. This isn't over, Marshal. I'll be back with the proper authorities. And when I am, those children will come with me, whether you like it or not. As the 3 riders disappeared into the night, Jake heard Emma whisper something that chilled him to the bone. Mama Sarah says he's coming back tonight with more men. She says we need to be ready. Jake didn't waste time questioning how Emma knew what she knew. When your 5-year-old daughter tells you dangerous men are coming in the night, you listen, even if that daughter talks to dead people. He gathered the children around the kitchen table, the oil lamp casting dancing shadows on their worried faces. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows like skeletal fingers trying to get in. We're going to play a game, Jake said, keeping his voice calm. It's called Stay Safe and Quiet. Can you do that for me? The twins nodded solemnly. Mary bit her lip, but held her chin high. Emma just watched him with those storm cloud eyes, like she could see things the others couldn't. "There's a tunnel," Emma said suddenly, "under the church. It goes all the way to the graveyard." Jake stared at her. "What tunnel?" "The one Preacher Morrison dug during the Indian troubles. Mama Sarah showed me." Emma pointed toward town. "We can go there and be safe." Jake had lived in Millerville for 8 years. He knew every building, every back alley, every hiding spot. There was no tunnel under the church. But then again, he'd also thought there was no loose floorboard in his house. A soft knock came at the back door. Jake's hand went to his gun, but then he heard a familiar voice. "Jake, it's Doc Henderson. You in there?" Jake cracked the door open. The old doctor stood on the back porch with his medical bag, but he wasn't alone. Behind him stood Tom Bradley, the blacksmith, and Pete Williams, who ran the livery stable. All 3 men were armed. "Heard Blackwood might be causing trouble tonight," Henderson said quietly. "Figured you could use some help." More footsteps approached in the darkness. Jake counted 6 more townspeople, all carrying rifles or shotguns. Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house. Young Billy Tucker, barely 18, but steady with a gun. Even old Father Morrison, the preacher, holding an ancient but well-maintained hunting rifle. "This isn't your fight," Jake said. Tom Bradley spat in the dirt. "Hell it ain't. We all know what kind of man Blackwood is. Using children like slaves ain't right, no matter what papers he's got." Emma tugged on Jake's sleeve. "They're good people," she said. "Mama Sarah likes them, but we still need to go to the tunnel." Father Morrison stepped forward. "What's the child talking about, Jake?" "She says there's a tunnel under your church. For the Indian troubles." The preacher's weathered face went pale in the moonlight. "Lord above, how could she know about that?" He looked down at Emma with wonder and fear. "Child, who told you about the old passage?" "The lady with kind eyes. She said you'd remember if I told you about the bell." Morrison nearly dropped his rifle. "The bell. We had the church bell down there when the Lakota came through in '68. Only 3 people knew about that tunnel, and 2 of them are dead." Jake felt the familiar chill that came with Emma's impossible knowledge. "Father, can the tunnel hide 4 children?" "It could hide a dozen if need be. Stone walls 3 feet thick, and the entrance is hidden behind the altar." A distant sound made them all freeze. Horses, moving fast, coming from the north road. "They're here," Emma whispered. Jake made his decision quickly. "Tom, Pete, take the children to the church. Use the back way through the cemetery. Father Morrison, show them the tunnel." "What about you?" Henderson asked. "I'm staying here. If Blackwood wants a fight, I'll give him one." Emma broke away from Mary and ran to Jake, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "Be careful, Daddy. The bad man has 6 men with him, and they all have guns." 6 men. Jake counted his defenders. 8 townspeople plus himself. Not great odds, but they had the advantage of knowing the terrain. "How do you know how many men he has?" Jake asked. Emma's eyes went distant for a moment, like she was listening to a voice only she could hear. "Mama Sarah can see them from up high. She says one of them is hiding by the water tower." Jake looked at Tom Bradley. "Can you check the water tower?" Quietly, the blacksmith nodded and melted into the shadows. Within minutes, there was a brief scuffle, then Tom's voice calling softly, "Got him. You were right about the water tower." The sound of approaching horses grew louder. Jake kissed Emma's forehead. "Go with Father Morrison now. Stay in the tunnel until I come for you. Promise you'll come back, Daddy." "I promise, sweetheart." He watched them disappear into the night, Emma's small hand in the preacher's larger one. Then he turned to face his remaining defenders. 7 good people willing to risk their lives for 4 orphan children. "Spread out," he ordered. "Use the house and outbuildings for cover. Don't shoot unless they shoot first. But if they do," he left the rest unsaid. The riders thundered up Main Street like the devil himself was chasing them. Blackwood rode at the front, his black coat streaming behind him. 5 men flanked him, all armed with rifles and pistols. They pulled up in front of Jake's house in a cloud of dust and jingling spurs. Sullivan, Blackwood's voice cut through the night air. I know you're in there. Send out the children and nobody gets hurt. Jake stepped onto his front porch, rifle cradled in his arms. Children are gone, Blackwood. Nothing here for you now. Blackwood's laugh was harsh and ugly. You think I'm stupid, Marshall? I saw lights in that house not 10 minutes ago. Those children are in there, and I'm taking them. Over my dead body. That can be arranged. Blackwood raised his hand, and his men spread out, surrounding the house. This is your last chance, Sullivan. Hand them over, or we come in shooting. Jake's answer was to cock his rifle. The sound echoed in the still night air like a challenge. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then, one of Blackwood's men fired a shot at the house. The bullet splintered the porch rail inches from Jake's head. All hell broke loose. Jake dug behind his porch steps as bullets whistled overhead. The townspeople opened fire from their hiding spots, muzzle flashes lighting up the night like deadly fireflies. Blackwood's horse reared and screamed, dumping its rider into the dirt. Take them alive if you can. Blackwood shouted, but kill Sullivan. Two of the gunmen rushed the front door. Jake shot the first one in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second one made it to the porch before Pete Williams put a bullet in his leg from behind the woodpile. Glass shattered as someone shot out the front window. Jake rolled to his left and came up firing, driving the attackers back toward the street. Behind you, Emma's voice rang out clear as a bell. Jake spun around just in time to see another gunman emerging from behind his house, rifle aimed at Jake's back. Without thinking, Jake dove sideways as the rifle cracked. The bullet burned a line across his shoulder instead of punching through his heart. He looked toward the church, but Emma wasn't there. Her voice had seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, like an angel's warning. The fight lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, 3 of Blackwood's men were down and wounded. The other 2 had fled into the night. Blackwood himself knelt in the street, blood running from a cut on his forehead, his hands raised in surrender. Don't shoot, he called out. I surrender. Jake kept his rifle trained on the man as he approached. Kind of you to give up after trying to murder half the town. This was all a misunderstanding, Blackwood panted. I just wanted what was legally mine. Nothing about you is legal, Jake said, and those children were never yours to take. Doc Henderson emerged from behind the general store, checking on the wounded gunman. They'll live, he called out, though they won't be riding anywhere for a while. Father Morrison appeared at Jake's side, slightly out of breath. The children are safe, all 4 of them, tucked away nice and tight. How did Emma know about the man behind the house? Jake asked quietly. The preacher shook his head in wonder. That child sees things, Jake. Things the rest of us can't. Maybe it's a gift. Maybe it's something else. But she saved your life tonight. Blackwood struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. You think this is over, Sullivan? I have friends in high places. Judges, politicians, territorial officials. They'll come for those children, and when they do, his words were cut off by the sound of approaching horses. But these weren't more of Blackwood's men. A wagon rolled down Main Street, followed by 2 riders wearing federal badges. The lead rider was a tall man with a gray beard and cold eyes. He surveyed the scene with professional interest before dismounting. I'm Deputy U.S. Marshal Thomas Grant, he announced. We've been tracking Cornelius Blackwood for suspected involvement in illegal mining operations and the use of child labor. Blackwood's face went white as fresh snow. Marshal Grant, this is all a misunderstanding. These people attacked me. Grant pulled a folded paper from his coat. Cornelius Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and the unlawful endangerment of minors. He looked at Jake. Marshal Sullivan, I presume? We received some interesting documents this afternoon. Something about forged guardianship papers and illegal mining claims. Jake blinked in surprise. Documents? I didn't send any documents. Emma's voice drifted from the direction of the church, soft but clear. Mama Sarah did. Grant raised an eyebrow. Actually, They came from a young woman named Beth Patterson at the boarding house. Said a little girl told her exactly where to find them and who to send them to. He looked toward the church. Remarkable child you've got there, Marshall. Seems to know things that could help a lot of people. As they loaded Blackwood and his wounded men into the wagon, the corrupt rancher looked back at Jake with pure hatred. This isn't over, Sullivan. That little girl of yours, she's not natural. Mark my words, that kind of strangeness brings nothing but trouble. Jake watched the wagon disappear into the night, then walked toward the church where 4 children waited in an underground tunnel. Emma had saved them all tonight, using knowledge that couldn't possibly exist. But as he pushed open the church door, Jake couldn't shake Blackwood's final words. What exactly was Emma? And why did Sarah's spirit seem so determined to communicate through her? Some questions, he muttered to himself, might be better left unanswered. At least for now. The courthouse in Millerville wasn't much to look at, just a wooden building with a tin roof and windows that rattled in the wind. But on this gray morning, it held the future of 4 children in its walls. Jake sat in the front row, watching Emma color pictures with a broken crayon while the twins whispered nervously to each other. Mary held herself straight and proud, but Jake could see the fear in her young eyes. Deputy Marshal Grant had been true to his word. Within 2 days of Blackwood's arrest, a proper judge had arrived from the territorial capital to sort out the mess. Judge William Harper was a fair man with kind eyes and a reputation for protecting children. But he was also a stickler for the law, and the law said guardianship went to the legal next of kin or creditor. All rise for the Honorable Judge Harper, called the bailiff. The small courtroom filled with creaking chairs and shuffling feet. Half the town had shown up to support Jake and the children. Dr. Henderson sat behind them, along with Father Morrison, the Bradleys, and even old Mrs. Patterson. Emma had told Jake that morning that the nice people want to help, and as usual, she was right. Judge Harper took his seat and adjusted his spectacles. We're here today to determine the proper guardianship of 4 minor children: Mary, Thomas, Timothy, and Emma Rose Croft. The court will hear all evidence before making its decision. Blackwood's lawyer, a thin man named Silas Cord, stood up first. Despite being in jail, Blackwood had managed to hire legal representation for Billings. Cord carried himself like a man who'd never lost a case and didn't plan to start now. Your Honor, Cord began, my client, Mr. Blackwood, has legal documentation proving his right to guardianship. The deceased parents owed him substantial sums, making him the legal custodian under Territorial Statute 47B. He presented a folder thick with papers. Jake's heart sank as he saw official seals and signatures. Legal documents were hard to fight, even when you knew they were wrong. Furthermore, Cord continued, Marshal Sullivan has no legal standing in this matter. He is not related to these children by blood or marriage and has no documented claim to guardianship. Judge Harper examined the papers carefully. These documents appear to be in order, Mr. Cord. Does Marshal Sullivan have representation? Jake started to stand, but a voice from the back of the courtroom interrupted him. I'll represent Marshal Sullivan, Your Honor. Everyone turned to see a woman in a dark blue dress walking down the aisle. She was maybe 40, with graying hair pinned back and the confident stride of someone used to courtrooms. Jake had never seen her before in his life. And you are? Judge Harper asked. Margaret Collins, attorney at law, recently of Denver. She set a leather briefcase on the table beside Jake. I've been retained to represent Marshal Sullivan in this matter. Jake leaned over and whispered, Ma'am, I appreciate the help, but I can't afford. You're not paying me, Marshal, she whispered back. Someone else already has. Emma looked up from her coloring and smiled at the lawyer. Thank you for coming, Miss Margaret. Mama Sarah said you'd know what to do. Margaret Collins went very still. She stared at Emma for a long moment, then pulled out a handkerchief and wiped her eyes. Yes, dear, I know exactly what to do. Judge Harper banged his gavel. If we could proceed, Margaret stood and addressed the court. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that Mr. Blackwood's documents are fraudulent and that he has no legitimate claim to these children. Court objected immediately. Your Honor, these documents have been properly filed and have been forged, Margaret interrupted. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers. I have here the original loan documents between William Croft and the Millerville Bank, showing that Mr. Croft's debts were fully paid 6 months before his death. She handed the papers to the bailiff. I also have sworn affidavits from 3 different clerks stating that Mr. Blackwood attempted to bribe them into backdating false debt certificates. Jake watched in amazement as Margaret presented document after document, each one dismantling Blackwood's legal case piece by piece. But where had she gotten all this evidence? And how had she known to look for it? Furthermore, Margaret continued, I have here a certified copy of a will, properly witnessed and notarized, in which William and Elizabeth Croft name Marshall Jake Sullivan as guardian for all 4 children in the event of their deaths. Jake's jaw dropped. That's impossible. I never. Margaret handed him a paper. In William Croft's careful handwriting were the words, in the event of our deaths, we name Jake Sullivan, Marshal of Millerville, as guardian to our children Mary, Thomas, Timothy, and Emma Rose. He is a good man who will protect them as his own. The document was dated just 2 weeks before the wagon crash. How is this possible? Jake whispered. Emma looked up at him with those storm cloud eyes. Papa William knew the bad man was coming. Mama Beth told him about you from the stories Mama Sarah used to tell. Judge Harper examined the will carefully. This appears to be genuine, Mrs. Collins. Mr. Cord, do you have any evidence to dispute its authenticity? Cord was sweating now, shuffling through his papers desperately. Your Honor, even if this will is genuine, it doesn't change the fact that my client has a prior legal claim based on forged documents, Judge Harper said sharply. Documents that Mrs. Collins has just proven to be fraudulent. There's more, Your Honor, Margaret said. She pulled out another folder. I have evidence that Mr. Blackwood has been operating illegal mining operations using child labor. Federal authorities are currently investigating claims at 3 different locations. She presented photographs that made Jake's stomach turn. Children as young as 8 working in dangerous mine shafts, their faces gaunt with hunger and exhaustion. These children, Margaret said, pointing to the photos, were all claimed by Mr. Blackwood through similar debt arrangements, all using forged documents identical to the ones presented today. Judge Harper's face darkened as he looked at the photographs. Mr. Cord, I hope you have some explanation for this. Cord was frantically whispering with an assistant. Your Honor, my client was unaware of any improper conditions at his various business enterprises. If violations occurred, they were the result of poor supervision, not intentional. Enough. Judge Harper's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. I've seen enough evidence to make my decision. Emma suddenly stood up on her chair. Judge Harper, sir. Yes, child. The scared children in the pictures want to go home, too. Will you help them? Judge Harper's stern expression softened. Yes, dear. We'll make sure all the children are safe. Emma nodded solemnly. Mama Sarah says thank you. She says justice is like sunshine. It always finds a way through the clouds. A hush fell over the courtroom. Judge Harper looked at Emma with wonder, then cleared his throat and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the room. After reviewing all evidence presented, this court finds that the documents presented by Mr. Blackwood are fraudulent and without legal merit. The will naming Marshall Jake Sullivan as guardian is authentic and legally binding. Jake felt like he could breathe again for the first time in days. Furthermore, Judge Harper continued, I am ordering a full federal investigation into Mr. Blackwood's business practices. Any children found to be held under similar fraudulent arrangements will be immediately removed and placed with proper families. He banged his gavel once. Guardianship of Mary, Thomas, Timothy, and Emma Rose Croft is hereby granted to Marshall Jake Sullivan, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Jake felt tears running down his face as all four children surrounded him in a group hug. Emma looked up at him with those impossible eyes and whispered something only he could hear. Mama Sarah says she can rest now, Daddy. But first, she wants to say goodbye. That evening, after the celebration had died down and the townspeople had gone home, Jake found himself walking with Emma toward the small cemetery behind the church. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Sarah's grave sat under an old oak tree, its headstone simple and weathered. Jake had visited it hundreds of times in the past 3 years, but tonight felt different. Final. Emma knelt beside the grave and placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the headstone. She's here, Daddy. Can you feel her? Jake closed his eyes and tried to sense something, anything. For just a moment, he could have sworn he felt a gentle touch on his shoulder, warm and familiar. She says she's proud of you, Emma whispered. And she says thank you for taking care of me and the others. She says we're a real family now. Jake opened his eyes and looked down at his daughter, with her storm cloud eyes and impossible wisdom. Emma, sweetheart, will you still be able to talk to Mama Sarah after tonight? Emma tilted her head, listening to something he couldn't hear. Then she smiled, and for the first time since he'd found her, she looked like a completely normal 5-year-old girl. She says, I won't need to anymore. She says, I have you now, and that's all she ever wanted. As they walked back toward town, Emma's small hand in his larger one, Jake felt something settle in his chest. Peace. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt truly at peace. Behind them, gentle wind stirred the flowers on Sarah's grave, then faded into the quiet evening air. The evening sun cast long shadows across the cemetery as Emma tugged at Jake's sleeve. She's waiting, the little girl whispered, those storm-gray eyes reflecting the fading light. Mama Sarah wants to say goodbye. Jake's throat tightened. 6 months had passed since the courthouse victory, since Blackwood's arrest, since the 4 children had officially become his. Emma's supernatural insights had grown fainter with each passing week, emerging only in quiet moments like this. Show me, he said softly. Emma led him past weathered headstones to a simple granite marker. Sarah Elizabeth Sullivan, beloved wife, gone too soon. Fresh wildflowers lay against the stone, flowers Jake hadn't placed there. She comes here sometimes, Emma said, settling cross-legged in the grass. When the moon is bright and the wind is still. She told me to tell you. The child's voice shifted, carrying an echo of maturity beyond her years. She told me to tell you that love doesn't end with death, Papa. It just changes shape. Jake knelt beside his daughter. The words still felt like a miracle. What else did she say? That she's sorry she couldn't tell you about me before the fire. Sorry you had to learn the hard way. Emma's small hand found his. But she's not sorry I found you. She said you were always meant to be my papa, even when I was living with Cousin Mary. Tears blurred Jake's vision. The fire that took Sarah had happened just days after she discovered her pregnancy. She'd never had the chance to share the joy, to tell him their love had created this perfect little person. She wants you to know, Emma continued, her voice growing softer, that she's proud of how you protected us. All of us. Tommy and Beth and little Samuel. We're your children now, too. As if summoned by her words, the wind stirred the wildflowers, carrying the faint scent of Sarah's favorite perfume. Jake's breath caught. Can you still see her? He asked. Emma tilted her head, considering. Not like before. She's fading now, like smoke when you blow out a candle. She says that's how it should be. The little girl's eyes, Sarah's eyes, met his. She says the living need to live, and the dead need to rest. And what do you say? Emma smiled, and for the first time, it was purely her own expression, not an echo of someone else. I say I love my papa, and I'm ready to just be Emma now. The supernatural weight that had clung to the child began lifting like morning mist. Jake felt it happening. the mysterious knowledge fading, the impossible awareness dimming. Emma was becoming just a little girl again, his little girl. One more thing, Emma whispered, her voice now completely her own. Mama Sarah says to look under the loose stone behind her headstone. She left something for you. With trembling fingers, Jake worked the small stone free. Beneath lay a sealed envelope, yellowed but intact. Inside, Sarah's familiar handwriting. My dearest Jake, if you're reading this, then our daughter found her way home to you. I hid this letter the night before the fire when I felt the danger coming. I wanted you to know we created something beautiful together. Her name is Emma Rose, and she has your stubborn chin and my eyes. Love her enough for both of us. Forever yours, Sarah. Jake's sob echoed across the silent cemetery. When he looked up, Emma was watching him with concern. Normal, childlike concern, free from otherworldly knowledge. Are you sad, Papa? No, sweetheart, he managed, pulling her close. I'm grateful. They walked home together as stars emerged overhead. Behind them, the wildflowers on Sarah's grave stirred once more in the windless air, then grew perfectly still. At the house, Jake found Tommy, Beth, and Samuel waiting on the porch, their faces bright with the security of belonging somewhere. His family, complete at last. Story time, Emma announced, bounding up the steps. Papa, will you tell us about the brave Marshal who saved 4 children? Jake laughed, the sound rich with newfound peace. Once upon a time, he began, gathering all 4 children close. There was a marshal who thought he'd lost everything, until he learned that love never really dies. It just finds new ways to grow. Emma curled against his side, her eyes, Sarah's eyes, growing heavy with sleep. But her smile was purely her own, and it was perfect,